Based gaming.
It is almost impossible to talk about Ace Attorney. Okay, well, it's not impossible. I'm doing it right now. I'm talking about Ace Attorney. But to convince the larger community to talk about it in a way that I would like to talk about it is something that I am not sure will ever happen. And obviously, I gotta get this out of the way. I am not some enlightened Ace Attorney guru. I don't have more knowledge than them. I don't think they're dumb. Whatever, yada yada. Insert the shit that I'm supposed to say to cover my ass here. The reason why is because as the series stands right now, the problems that I have with it are problems that people in the community do not really view as problems. My issues with Ace Attorney are issues that only myself and a small minority of the fan base actually have. To even get people talking about this problem would require me to convince people that it's even a problem to begin with. And to be honest, considering what it is and how the community has reacted to the games as of late, I don't think that's going to be possible. The problem I'm talking about is that the actual mystery solving aspect of Ace Attorney, the actual part of the game where you have to take a murder plot and basically unsolve it given evidence from the prosecution and turn it into something completely different to catch a new culprit, has remained stagnant in quality since the original trilogy, with the only exception to this being the witch trials in PLvsAA. Ace Attorney has not progressed past this point, and the reason why that matters is because the quality of the trilogy is not a good starting point. It's just a series of very experimental ideas that can only be given a pass because it was the first time they were done. Otherwise, everything after that continues to repeat these very bad and experimental ideas only looks worse and worse because of the lack of innovation on this side of the game series. In essence, Ace Attorney is fundamentally broken. Now, because this video isn't about thoroughly criticizing Ace Attorney, because I don't want to go through all that shit, I'm not gonna go in depth on each and every explanation as to why this series is fundamentally broken in my eyes. But what I will do is give you a general overview on some of the topics and why they are very hard to discuss in this community. So first, let's go over what I mean when I say that this series is fundamentally broken. I would say you could divide Ace Attorney into two fundamental parts: the trial section and the investigation section. And I think both of which, in their current state, are horribly flawed and in desperate need of improvement. For the testimony system, right? In the first case of the game, it is established that in a testimony, you can press for more information or object with evidence to get out of it. To object with evidence, you need to find a contradiction between a piece of evidence and a witness's statement. And this system, while I really like it at its face, is sort of the origin of a large series of problems that stems from it. The summary I just gave you of the rules of how to get out of a testimony and how the testimony works actually are a lot more complicated in practice than I just described, because the problem all comes down to the developers having to define what a contradiction is and how you should be treating these testimonies. And in an effort to do that, while scaling it in difficulty as the game progresses, you start to get some really shitty ideas that have kind of become mainstays of the series. Because for a lot of these ideas, if you take into account the rules of how the Ace Attorney courtroom is supposed to be run, a lot of the contradictions that you're supposed to find in some of the testimonies that you're given throughout the series can sometimes actually make little to no sense or have obvious rebuttals that get thrown away for what feels like no reason. Basically, the game doesn't follow its own rules all the time, and that can be really shitty because the way the mysteries are unveiled in this series is that you have to slowly deconstruct what happened and reconstruct it piece by piece to figure out a new, clear picture on who the real murderer of a given crime is. Now, just to make sure we're all on the same page here, I'm gonna pull out at least one example that gives you a general overview of what I'm talking about. In Ace Attorney 1, there's this testimony Cody Hackins gives where he says that he wasn't able to take a picture of the battle between the Steel Samurai and the culprit. In response to this, you're supposed to present his photo album, because every time the Steel Samurai wins a fight, Cody always takes a picture of it to log in his album. And since Cody said the Steel Samurai won this fight, therefore he must have a picture in his album. The problem is that this doesn't actually make sense at all. In fact, this objection is kind of bullshit, because it just assumes that Cody would have taken a picture, even though he clearly said in the same testimony that he was struggling to use his new digital camera. So why is it not possible that he just didn't take a picture? you also have to use the falling out of this point to prove that the fact he didn't take a picture means that the Steel Samurai must have lost, which given the earlier reasoning is completely ridiculous because it doesn't actually prove that at all. Sure, it suggests that that may have happened, but it doesn't prove it definitively happened. And the reason why it matters that it wasn't proved definitively that it happened is because this courtroom, as it's been presented to us throughout the game, is very concerned with evidence. Evidence is everything in court. It is a key staple that the characters keep repeating. They keep saying how evidence is the only way to communicate in this setting. But the problem is that the evidence that they're claiming to be using in this situation isn't actually proving what they're saying at all, which really matters because the entire game is based on trying to find an objection. And if you're consciously aware of the court's rules, and you're consciously aware of how you're trying to think about certain things, then solving the actual puzzle that is each testimony gets a lot less rewarding as a result when the answers are total bullshit. And there are a bunch more instances of this throughout the trilogy, and especially the most recent game. Like DGS 1 and 2 and the Yamazaki 3DS games are basically riddled with these types of problems. And this is only one issue, by the way. There are much more complicated issues with how the difficulty is structured in these cases, how pressing is effectively worthless, how sometimes pressing is used in really shitty ways to the point where it just negatively affects testimonies, to the exclamation point system that was introduced in PLvsAA and how that was not adequately built upon. There are also problems stemming from the jury, stemming from reasoning behind keeping witnesses on the stand. There are problems stemming from the testimony structure like I brought up in the DGS video that I made a while ago. It's honestly one big shit show with a lot of minor examples that add up over the course of a case to really drag down its overall quality. Like, there are a lot of twists and turns that are grossly unsatisfying because of how lazy the writing is sometimes at building up to them. Like, it's great and all that you come up with some big reveal, but if the process that leads up to that makes no fucking sense in a game where I'm trying to make sense of shit, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose, doesn't it? And that's just the testimony system. I haven't even gotten into the whirlwind of ridiculousness that is the investigation system. Like, the courtroom segments are bad, but the investigations are just in such a blatantly awful spot right now that it is insane. But again, I'm not here to go over everything in all these minute details because it would take way too fucking long, and honestly it probably wouldn't be worth my time in the long run. And this brings us back to the overall issue that I want to talk about in this video. These complaints are not really relevant to anyone in the fan base because the fan base doesn't really care about the mysteries in the same way that I discussed here. No, because the fan base is way more focused on the overarching story and the characters inside of it. There is not a lot of emphasis on the mysteries and the actual logistics of how they go about being solved. And this is not the fault of anyone in particular. They just have different priorities. But I know I personally run into problems where I have actually had to try to convince people that this perspective that I have even remotely matters, because there's just this running belief that the games aren't even about this in the first place, which is really frustrating for me because not only am I a big fan of making fan cases, which heavily rely on me doing this type of shit well or else they fail, but I'm also noticing these same problems that no one is addressing coming up in game after game after game. And when you're like several games into it with like DGS 2 or whatever, and you're still seeing the same issues come up in different forums, it's like, come on. And it gets even worse, right? Because I'm stuck here sitting all these shitty video essays talking about things like, oh, the story and characters weren't balanced in this way, or oh, because of this certain writing rule, it is therefore hindering the series from progressing. Like, I just, no, that's not the issue at all. That is not the overall problem here. Because they're acting like just by changing a bunch of random arbitrary shit in the story, it's all of a sudden gonna fix everything about the series, when the series was not alright to begin with. And until we can have conversations about things like the actual testimony structure, the mystery structure, the rules of the courtroom, the way investigations are laid out, etc., then we are forever going to be stuck replaying the same games over and over again, but with a different setting. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this. The actual minute details and specifics surrounding all these problems that I brought up with Ace Attorney, and all the ones I didn't bring up, are way too many to be able to list off in this one video, and they would probably require like a whole video series of their own just covering these different topics. Like, I would basically have to reteach this series to you in order for me to catch everyone up to speed on what they've been missing from 2001 to 2017 of Ace Attorney games. And to be honest, that sounds kind of shitty, and I don't want to do that, and I'm still stuck here working on these DR videos that I'm still fucking taking way too long to release because they're making me want to die. So don't expect that in the future. And that's the end of that. I've been CE53 based gaming, Peter Griffin, Among Us, Sus, James Charles, Sister Fister, Minecraft Sister Gisters, and Blisters, and you're watching Disney Channel.
Well, would you look at that. Dual Destinies made number 4 on the list once again. I'll be honest, this is just a total coincidence. It's not that I find Dual Destinies to be average or anything like that. Hell, it's probably the best in the franchise if we're talking technically. And pretty much every case from this game is good. Even the one I singled out for the worst list isn't that bad. And of course, we even managed to avoid third case syndrome.